So if you could first introduce yourself and your role within the Hungary branch of the UNHCR.
I am Erno Simon. I'm Hungarian myself, and I work in the Budapest office of UNHCR as the spokesperson of UNHCR in Hungary.
So then could you discuss UNHCR Hungary's mission statement, as well as some ways in which your branch has worked towards this mission?
It's important to know before we start that our office here in Budapest is not just an office for Hungary. This is a regional representation at the moment. There is a huge global restructuring going on in the agency. So probably this restructuring will affect us and our Budapest office as well in the near future. But at the moment, 9 countries in Central Europe are covered from here, from Budapest, by my colleagues. I'm responsible only for Hungary, but there are several colleagues responsible for the entire region. And this region includes 9 countries. I mean, the regional office covers 9 countries in Central Europe. These 9 countries are Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary. These are the Visegrad 4 countries, plus Slovenia, Croatia, Romania, Bulgaria, and Moldova. So our office, our Budapest representation covers 8 other countries apart from Hungary. And it is important that 8 countries out of these 9 are members of the European Union. The only exception is Moldova, which is still not a member state of the EU. And even though these 8 countries are all members of the EU, there are huge differences. So this is not a uniform or a homogeneous region. Of course, all these countries are former, 30 years ago, former communist countries, and we have very much, well, a lot of similarities in our past and in our present. Still, not only politically there are huge differences, but even directly regarding the asylum systems and the asylum situation in these countries, there are very significant differences.
Great, thank you. So your agency is engaged in many public information activities that have been aimed at raising awareness and educating the public. Could you talk a little bit about the importance of helping refugees integrate into society, as well as how we can help them do so?
Well, the integration is probably the most important step forward, both for a refugee and for the host community. It is a mutual interest, I should say. Of course, for a refugee, it is important to be able to speak the language, to be able to find a job, and to be able to earn enough money to support their family, and also this is about. It might sound like a big word, but this is really essential. It is really important for their basic human dignity. So, if you are a father and the head of a family, or even if you are a single refugee, man or woman, it doesn't matter. You would be much more secure about yourself, and you would be much more, I would say, you would be much more proud of yourself if you could earn for your living, and you were not dependent on others, on state aid or aid from charity organizations, aid from NGOs, but you can earn what you need for living. And of course, this is important, and this is very beneficial for the host communities too, because if a refugee has a job, he or she is employed, then the person doesn't need state aid, doesn't need aid from the local community. So it is a very direct benefit. And of course, he would pay taxes. income taxes. But what is even more important, uh, in a way, a person who can feel himself or herself equal with others, with local people, uh, would be integrated in a much more um, sustainable and stable way, and and will be much less uh, how should I say, will be much less open to temptations like petty crime or anything. So a refugee who was forced to flee his or her own home country by war, by persecution, by violence, basically, uh, a refugee doesn't need any new conflicts, any new troubles in his or her life. What they want stability, they want peace, they want security, and this is what they can achieve by working, by receiving education for their children, by receiving and enjoying the same rights what locals enjoy, and by integrating into the local community. It is about any local activities, local volunteering groups, local, I don't know, music communities, whatever. And and if somebody, and this is somewhat related, somewhat a new idea, new approach, if somebody has new friends, somebody is integrated into a local community, uh, it is it is really mutual benefit again. Of course, this is beneficial and very positive development for the refugee family. But refugees are people just like you and me. They have all sorts of skills and they can contribute in many ways to the local community. So if they are welcome, if they are given the chance to integrate, then they can contribute to the local community using their skills, using their experience, using their whatever.
So then, in regards to informing people, what do you think we as the public and also governmental leaders need to do to change the outlook towards refugees?
Well, it is very simple. We simply must be or should be um, welcoming. We should be open to them. Uh, we should, first of all, we need information. We need information. We need to know who refugees are. Refugees, as I've already said, refugees are people who were forced to flee their homes by the so-called circumstances. So this is not their own decision that they leave everything behind. Uh, if they decided to stay, they if they had decided to stay, they would have died. They would have ended up in prison. Probably they would have been tortured or tortured to death. There are some countries where it can happen because of somebody's political views, because of somebody's religion, because of somebody's national or ethnic origins, or even sexual orientation. So it can happen, and and everybody deserves a safe and secure life. And if somebody is forced to flee his or her home or home country and has to find safety somewhere else, then this new country is not only by the international law, but even morally obliged to welcome the person and to give a chance to this person to start a new life there in safety and in dignity.
Well, not everything is ideal and easy either, and there are always bound to be differing opinions or interests. How much pushback have you guys faced with your efforts, and what obstacles have you encountered?
Well, the last big refugee wave arrived to this region in 2015, 5 years ago, exactly 5 years ago, and the local population reacted to that wave uh, in different ways. When thousands of refugees crossed the border between Serbia and Hungary in July, August, September 2015, for example, a large part of the population was a very helpful. Thousands or maybe tens of thousands of volunteers gathered at places, even in the capital in Budapest and in other places in Hungary, and they, for weeks, they were helping refugee families. They were preparing food, providing drinking water, providing shelter. Young people came to those places, and for hours they were playing with children. They were even using their projectors and projected animated cartoons on the walls of the railway stations in central Budapest for those children, and many other very nice things happened. But a very significant other part of the population reacted in a rather intolerant, in some cases really racist and xenophobic way. So unfortunately, the political debate turned into a very negative direction, and many politicians, not only in Hungary, of course, everybody's aware that it was an international, and still it is an international tendency, unfortunately, and it became increasingly common in 2015, and it has been becoming increasingly common ever since, that politicians started to play on this xenophobic, racist, intolerant attitude. So yeah, it is a problem, and Hungary was one of the first countries in Europe which built a border fence, a 4-meter high border fence along its border, its southern border, its border with Serbia, and then its border with Croatia. This is a 4-meter high metallic fence with rows of razor wire, so-called NATO wire, on the top of the fence, and the aim, the goal of the Hungarian authorities with this fence was explicitly to deter refugees and asylum seekers from coming to Hungary. And later on, the Hungarian authorities built 2 so-called transit zones. These were 2 detention facilities built directly at the border fence, so directly at the border with Serbia, and hundreds of asylum seekers were detained all the time in those 2 transit zones. When we kept repeating that, according to the international asylum law, asking for asylum and coming to the border of a certain country without proper travel documents or without a proper visa as an asylum seeker is not a crime. Asking for asylum is a fundamental human right guaranteed by the international law. And if somebody arrives to a country's border and asks for asylum, he or she cannot be punished or sanctioned in any ways. These people who were arriving for years to the Hungarian border, they had nothing to do with Hungary. The only thing what they did in Hungary, they submitted their asylum claims to the Hungarian authorities. Still, they ended up in these detention facilities, and now we are really allowed, even by the recent decision of the Court of Justice of the European Union, we are allowed to call these two transit zones detention facilities because this European court decided that people were kept in detention in those two facilities. So this was against international law. This was against all sorts of international agreements, international conventions to which Hungary was a signatory country. And what is even more, I would say, heartbreaking is that it didn't affect only adults. It affected families with children. It affected unaccompanied refugee children who arrived to Hungary without their parents or any other relatives. I'm talking about unaccompanied children between the age of 14 and 18. So children younger than 18 years old were put into detention for months and in many cases for over a year or over a year and a half. We are talking about extended periods of being detained, and it affected much younger children, even babies and toddlers, 1, 2, 4, 5-year-old children who were together with their parents, of course, but still, this is a very basic fact, and I think nobody can question it, that children never belong behind bars in any circumstances.
And then going off of my previous question, how has the COVID-19 pandemic specifically affected the process of seeking refuge and asylum, and how has it affected your efforts to assist refugees, if in any way?
Oh, well, these two transit zones I have just been talking about, these two transit zones were closed in the second half of May after the decision of the European Court of Justice, when the Hungarian government decided to close these two transit zones. The Hungarian government also decided to practically close the border, close the country's borders for refugees. Now, Hungarian authorities allow refugees to inform the Hungarian authorities about their intent to ask for asylum in Hungary only in the country's embassy in Belgrade, Serbia, and Kyiv, Ukraine. These are the only two places where potential asylum seekers can notify the Hungarian authorities about their intent. And then the Hungarian authorities have 60 days to decide whether the person is allowed or not to come to the country's border and finally really submit his or her asylum application. So this is a new situation since this new asylum law entered into force in late June. So since then, in the last two months, practically not a single asylum seeker could enter Hungary. Some people, around 20 around 20 people, according to the latest numbers I've heard about. Some 20 people have already asked for asylum in the Hungarian embassy in Belgrade, Serbia. But according to my information, nobody was yet informed about the positive decision of the Hungarian authorities, meaning nobody was allowed yet to come to Hungary. The consequence is practically there are almost no asylum seekers at the moment in Hungary. We are talking about two-digit numbers. So definitely there are no hundreds and no tens of thousands of asylum seekers in Hungary. This was a political decision, and this is totally not acceptable, especially not acceptable in the case of a country which is a signatory country of the 1951 UN Refugee Convention and signatory country of lots of other international documents like Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other documents, and is a member state of the European Union, where the asylum regulations, asylum laws of the European Union are also mandatory for this country.
So, more personally than about you, how did you get interested in the field? What drew you in? And what path did you take to get to where you are today?
I have been with UNHCR for over 8 years now. Before joining UNHCR, I had been working as a journalist for 2 decades, covering international affairs. So I was an international affairs correspondent, working in print media outlets. And uh, after some changes, I decided to leave the media. And I always had interest in humanitarian affairs, in human rights issues and related stuff. So when I after 20 years of working as a journalist and editor, I decided to leave the media. Uh, I I was looking for an appropriate job, an enjoyable job, and it was probably one of the happiest accidents or happiest coincidence in my life that there was a job vacancy in the Budapest office of UNHCR. It was only a temporary part-time job, only for 3 months at that time, but it happened more than 8 years ago, so I'm still here.
Wow. Um, and then just one last question. Could you discuss some ways for young people around the world to help or get involved, especially during these unprecedented times?
So could you repeat the question? I lost your voice for some seconds.
Oh, yeah, sure. Could you discuss some ways for young people around the world to help or get involved, especially during these unprecedented times?
Oh, well, of course, everybody should be very cautious with this COVID-19 pandemic.
Mhm.
So first of all, everybody should take care of themselves. This is really important. There is a saying in UNHCR and in NGOs working with refugees and with other people in need. So if you want to help, first you must be able to help. This is just like passengers on a plane. So when these security instructions are given at takeoff, then stewards and stewardesses tell you that when something is happening, then you should put the oxygen mask first on yourself and then onto your child, because the child probably will not be able to reciprocate and to put the mask on you if, God forbid, you faint or something happens to you. So first, you must be able to help. You must be healthy. You must be safe, and this is it. But when we work on ensuring our own safety, our own safety, we should never forget about people who are forced to live in much harsher circumstances, who are challenged by much harsher living conditions. So yes, you can always help. Just like during the COVID-19 pandemic, refugees were helping others. If you go to YouTube, if you go to our UNHCR Facebook accounts or Twitter pages, you can see lots of videos and other multimedia stories from the last half year or so about refugees in Switzerland, in Kenya, in Singapore, in Bangladesh, even in the US and Canada, by the way, who decided to help elderly people, who decided to help people with chronic illnesses who belong to the so-called risk groups regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. And refugees were collecting their shopping lists, and they did the shopping for them in grocery stores and other places. Or even I remember some videos where refugees decided to teach people online to languages and other stuff, or refugees who had sewing machines and who had the skills to use those machines. They were sewing hundreds of thousands of protective masks. Or in refugee camps, refugees produced soaps. Yeah, sorry. They produce soaps, and because it is a very simple thing still. This pandemic is special in the way that soap, a simple thing like soap, can save your life.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was happening. So if refugees who live in much poorer conditions in most cases, and who face much bigger challenges than you do or I do, if they are able to help us, we definitely should be able to help them.